Hello, I'm Brian Genscher. Today with Stratfor's Vice President of International Projects, Jennifer Richmond. She also happens to be one of our foremost China experts, and today I'll be asking her about that country's leadership transition. Now, Jennifer, how does a country like China, that doesn't have elections, that were very opaque about the actual internal structure, how does it choose its leadership?
China's leaders are groomed years and years in advance. So actually, Jiang Zemin was responsible for handpicking Xi Jinping. A lot of times, the leaders that we see rise to the Politburo Standing Committee have had experience in provincial leadership positions before they actually come to the central government. And this is a pretty common trend. But what's interesting about this transition is we kind of see this as the end of what we call the Deng dynasty. So Deng Xiaoping was responsible for picking Jiang Zemin, his immediate successor, and even picking Hu Jintao. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, was actually handpicked by Jiang Zemin. So this is a significant change. The other thing that's interesting about this succession is that we've seen a lot of scandal prior to this succession, namely with Bo Xilai and his wife, Gu Kailai. And this has really done a lot to kind of reshuffle and shift around the powers that be, who's going to choose the successors, who's going to be in the final lineup. Now, the final lineup always shifts. We never know really until the party congress concludes. However, this has been particularly contentious insofar as we've seen reformers and conservatives engaging in intense backroom negotiations. And this is something that will not really allay until the final meeting. We expect that to be November 15th when the final lineup is approved and actually walks out on stage. So the transition really remains opaque. But one of the areas that we need to be watching in addition to the party is also the Central Military Commission.
Now, a few of the positions in this military commission have already been changed out, or what's going on?
We have seen some definite shifts with the Central Military Commission. We still don't know who is going to be in the final lead up to the Politburo and more importantly, the Politburo Standing Committee. We have some guesses, but it's shifting, as I said, as a result of the backroom negotiations. However, we have a more definitive view of what the Central Military Commission is going to look like. Most recently, they mentioned who it's going to be, or they appointed, the two vice chairmen. These are two very important positions underneath the chairman, who is also usually the party secretary of the party and the president of the state. So the two vice chairmen are set to be Fan Changlong and Xu Qiliang. Now, what's interesting is Xu Qiliang is the commander of the Air Force, and now he's being elevated to the vice chairman position. What's interesting about this is he's the first vice chairman that is not an army general. So this really indicates to us that the government is very, very focused on trying to diversify between the armed forces. Now, Fan Changlong is interesting because he is considered to be doing what we call a double jump. And what's interesting about that is he's not an incumbent on the Central Military Commission. So he's moved from a position straight to the top of the leadership of the Central Military Commission. There are 3 people in the Central Military Commission that we knew were going to stay on through this transition. He's not one of them. So his appointment suggests some very intense backroom negotiations, backroom wrangling going on.
And how important is this commission to the actual leadership of the country? I mean, what role does it play in terms of setting, for example, economic policy? Does it? Or how exactly is this dynamic working?
Well, that's interesting. The Central Military Commission obviously isn't given as much of focus as the party, but it's incredibly important. It's important for several reasons. If you remember Deng Xiaoping, he actually never had a greater role than in his role as the chairman of the Military Commission. Although he was the paramount leader, his only official role was really the chairman of the Central Military Commission. So a lot has changed since Deng Xiaoping was in power, but the role of the Central Military Commission is still extremely important, and it's becoming actually more so now, particularly as we see China moving out, becoming more global. We look at the South China Sea, the East China Sea disputes. We look at energy supplies. I mean, the Military Commission, or the military itself, is actually the defender of China's energy supplies. So we're seeing them become more and more vocal in China's foreign policy and more vocal domestically as well as externally, internationally.
Now, along with China's new role in the world, so to speak, where do we see the leaders this new leadership generation taking China? Do we expect massive reforms? Do we expect a continuation of the status quo? Where does it go?
Well, there absolutely is a demand for reform right now. But one of the problems within China is there are so many vested interests. It really makes reform hard to accomplish. So we see a genuine push for reform, but whether or not they're going to be successful is another question. And moreover, if they are going to push for reform, which in some way we expect that they will, they're going to want to do so slowly and incrementally. But the problem is the external and the internal problems, as they mount up, they may not be able to do so in the time frame that they choose. Most recently, one of the rumors that we've seen coming out of China is that there is this push by Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping to bring in some very limited elections for the Politburo. Now, the bigger question really is who are choosing the contenders for this election. So even if this really amounts to very little, the point is that they are talking about reform because they really need to boost their legitimacy. This is extremely important.
And taking it out just one step further from this internal politicking, where does this leave China's role in the world? Is it going to branch out? How do the United States, how does South Korea, Japan, how do they view these transitions? Is it an opportunity? Is it a threat? And is China concerned about any of that?
China right now, really, when it comes down to it, they're not really concerned about how the rest of the world looks at them. Really, their main priority is control within China. The main priority of the party is to maintain control, and if there is going to be reform, to be able to be the one to lead the reform. So really, their biggest concern is internal unrest. And that's really important. But what won't change, regardless of the reform that happens within the party, within the state, is what won't change is the central military's role globally. Energy is still going to be important, whether or not they have political reforms. The South China Sea, the East China Sea, these are all major transport routes. These are going to continue to be important to China. So regardless of what domestic internal changes we see, we're still going to see a continued emphasis on the military commission, both to help maintain control within China as well as externally outside of China.
All right, and we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And for much more on the Chinese leadership transition, please visit stratfor.com. Thank you for watching.